Chapter 14. A Young Rajah. The moor was hidden in mist when the morning came, and the rain had not stopped pouring down. There could be no going out of doors. Martha was so busy that Mary had no opportunity of talking to her, but in the afternoon she asked her to come and sit with her in the nursery. She came, bringing the stocking she was always knitting when she was doing nothing else.
"What's the matter with thee?"
she asked as soon as she sat down. "Thou looks as if thou'd something to say."
I have
found out what the crying was," said Mary. Martha let her knitting drop on her knee and gazed at her with startled eyes.
"Thou hasn't,"
she exclaimed.
"Never."
"I heard it in the night," Mary went on, "and I got up and went to see where it came from. It was Colin. I found him." Martha's face became red with fright.
"Hey, Miss Mary," she said, half crying, "thou shouldn't have done it. Thou shouldn't. Thou'll get me in trouble. I never told thee nothing about him, but thou'll get me in trouble. I shall lose my place, and what'll mother do?"
"You won't lose your place," said Mary. "He was glad I came. We talked and talked, and he said he was glad I came."
"Was he?"
cried Martha.
"Art thou sure? Thou doesn't know what he's like when anything vexes him. He's a big lad to cry like a baby, but when he's in a passion he'll fair scream just to frighten us. He knows us daren't call our souls our own."
"He wasn't vexed," said Mary. "I asked him if I should go away, and he made me stay. He asked me questions, and I sat on a big footstool and talked to him about India and about the robin and the gardens. He wouldn't let me go. He let me see his mother's picture before I left him, and I sang him to sleep." Martha fairly gasped with amazement.
"I can scarcely believe thee," she protested. "It's as if they'd walked straight into Lion's Den. If he'd been like he is most times, he'd have throwed himself into one of his tantrums and roused the house. He won't let strangers look at him."
"He let me look at him. I looked at him all the time, and he looked at me. We stared," said Mary.
"I don't know what to do," cried agitated Martha. "If Mrs. Medlock finds out, she'll think I broke orders and told thee, and I shall be packed back to my mother."
"He is not going to tell Mrs. Medlock anything about it yet. It's to be a sort of secret just at first," said Mary firmly. "And he says everybody is obliged to do as he pleases."
"Aye, that's true enough, the bad lad,"
sighed Martha, wiping her forehead with her apron. "He says Mrs. Medlock must, and he wants me to come and talk to him every day. And you are to tell me when he wants me."
"Me?" said Martha. "I shall lose my place. I shall for sure."
"You can't if you are doing what he wants you to do and everybody is ordered to obey him," Mary argued.
"Does thou mean to say," cried Martha with wide-open eyes, "that he was nice to thee?"
"I think he almost liked me," Mary answered.
"Then thou must have bewitched him,"
decided Martha, drawing a long breath.
"Do you mean magic?"
inquired Mary. "I've heard about magic in India, but I can't make it. I just went into his room and I was so surprised to see him I stood and stared. And then he turned round and stared at me. And he thought I was a ghost or a dream, and I thought perhaps he was. And it was so queer being there alone together in the middle of the night and not knowing about each other. And we began to ask each other questions. And when I asked him if I must go away, he said I must not.
The world's coming to an end, gasped Martha.
What is the matter with him? Asked Mary.
Nobody knows for sure and certain, said Martha. Mr. Craven went off his head like when he was born. The doctors thought he'd have to be put in asylum. It was because Mrs. Craven died, like I told you. He wouldn't set eyes on the baby. He just raved and said it'd be another hunchback like him and it had better die.
Is Colin a hunchback? Mary asked. He didn't look like one.
He isn't yet, said Martha. But he began all wrong. Mother said that there was enough trouble and raging in the house to set any child wrong. They was afraid his back was weak and they've always been taking care of it, keeping him lying down and not letting him walk. Once they made him wear a brace, but he fretted so he was downright ill. Then a big doctor came to see him and made them take it off. He talked to other doctor quite rough, in a polite way. He said there'd been too much medicine and too much letting him have his own way.
I think he's a very spoiled boy, said Mary.
He's the worst young nowt as ever was, said Martha. I won't say as he hasn't been ill a good bit. He's had coughs and colds that's nearly killed him 2 or 3 times. Once he had rheumatic fever and once he had typhoid. Mrs. Medlock did get a fright then. He'd been out of his head and she was talking to the nurse thinking he didn't know nothing, and she said, he'll die this time sure enough, and best thing for him and for everybody. And she looked at him, and there he was with his big eyes open, staring at her as sensible as she was herself. She didn't know what had happened, but he just stared at her and says, "You give me some water and stop talking."
Do you think he will ever die? Asked Mary.
Mother says there's no reason why any child should live that gets no fresh air and doesn't do nothing but lie on his back and read picture books and take medicine. He's weak and hates the trouble of being taken outdoors, and he gets so cold easy and he says it makes him ill.
Mary sat and looked at the fire.
I wonder, she said slowly, if it would not do him good to go out into a garden and watch things growing. It did me good,